It is Davos Day 3 and another very, very jam-packed day of activities with conversations including climate change and the economy as we know it and what's to come in the future, optimism, pessimism, and a little bit in between. We've seen a number of high-level dignitaries today going from one session to the other. Managing Director, for instance, of the International Monetary Fund, Kristalina Georgieva, the Senator of in the United States, the Massachusetts Senator John Kerry, who was in a climate change session, and the Central Bank Governor of Kenya, the Kenya Central Bank Governor, also as well in among the crowd here, going from one session to another, talking about a whole number of issues. One major issue, of course, is where the world is headed. The head of the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres, saying that the world right now is in a sorry state.
We can't confront problems unless we look them squarely in the eye. And we are looking into the eye of a Category 5 hurricane. Our world is plagued by a perfect storm on a number of fronts. Start with the short term, a global economic crisis. The outlook, as we all know, is bleak. Many parts of the world face recession, and the entire world faces a slowdown. And we see deepening inequalities and the rapidly unfolding cost of living crisis affecting women and girls the most.
Also, some big news coming out of Japan with the Bank of Japan holding firm as far as its yield curve coverage is concerned, capping rates at 0.5%, making no changes today. The economy minister of Japan, Mr. Nishimura, saying that Japan needs more younger leaders, and that's something that would resonate on the African continent that has some of the oldest heads of state in the world.
日本の社会はおじさん中心の社会であったわけで。
Japan's economy has long been run by a bunch of old men. The remnants of the shower era remain. We need to change this drastically because we need diverse ideas to bring about innovation in the new era. You shouldn't make decisions with any old men who have spent a long time in the same company. A diverse workforce with young people, women, foreigners who want to work in Japan, do things with Japan, outstanding foreigners we would like to welcome.
Ukraine very much front and center with the Russian invasion now going on a year by February of this year. There is, of course, the loss of human lives and the impact on global markets. Vladimir Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, addressing a crowd here in Davos. The mayor of Kiev, Vitaly Klitschko, spoke about the tragic helicopter crash that claimed the life of the Interior Minister of Ukraine. He also gave an optimistic outlook on what he hopes for his nation.
People want to invest in Ukraine, and in this right now, actually, to invest in the country which in the middle of the war is huge risk. And but we're talking today for day after tomorrow, and it's very important to have a master plan, to have a roadmap, what we have to do, and because success of Ukraine is the best answer. Success of Ukraine is goal for our partner, for everyone who trusts in our homeland.
In non-economic news, there was a session on the 75th commemoration of the Human Rights Declaration. Human rights, of course, a pressing issue that is being addressed here at the World Economic Forum 2023.
We have seen a backsliding on issues that affect women and girls. And I have to say, of course, the most extreme example is Afghanistan, but we have also seen it in the global north in a number of countries, and I think it's important that we are careful about not losing the terrain that we have gained on gender equality issues. Mm-hmm. We've also seen a backsliding on civic space in a number of countries. I mean, there are autocratic tendencies in many countries around the world, and it has obviously an impact on human rights.
So a whole number of issues being addressed, geopolitical, economic, social issues. It's all happening here at Davos 2023 in Switzerland. Rhoda Sodiri, Arise News.
Well, let's stay with our business correspondent there, Rotus Odiri, in Davos, of course, because he's been speaking to the governor of the Reserve Bank of South Africa, Lesetja Kganyago. He began by asking him if he believes there'll be a global recession in 2023 and whether South Africa could be vulnerable.
South Africa is a small open economy. We are integrated into the global economic system. We are a major exporter of commodities. The question that would come is, if a recession sets in, what does it mean for commodity prices? What does the opening up of China mean for global growth? What does it mean for inflation? And what does it mean for commodity prices? Those are the big questions that we are going to have to grapple with. South Africa faces its own risks, and those risks have to do with our long-standing structural constraints. And add to that the fact that inflation has been rising globally, and in South Africa it had also been rising. On the domestic front, we started early to adjust policy to deal with inflation. On the global side, the developed economies moved a little bit late.
Is monetary policy enough to bring inflation down in South Africa, for instance?
Monetary policy is what has to be implemented to deal with inflation, irrespective of whether that inflation is coming from overseas or is coming from the domestic sources. The way in which we deal with it is that we look at the external shocks to the inflation outlook, and then ask ourselves the question, are these shocks temporary? If they are temporary, we do nothing. If the shocks are lasting or they lead to second round effects in the domestic price formation, then we are forced to act. And so we were not sure when we started in 2021 to tighten policy. We were moving gradually, and then we saw evidence that the prices are starting to spread beyond just the energy shock and the food price shock, and that they are starting to spread to other prices. And in that instance, then monetary policy has got to act.
Okay, so year-on-year inflation, we saw it come down from 7.4% in November to actually from 7.6% in October to 7.4% in November. So would you say that your monetary tightening has been working?
Too early to tell. If you see what is happening, this would be in respect of the actions that were taken at least 12 months ago, not the most recent ones, because monetary policy works with a lag. The reading that we saw yesterday had just confirmed that 7.8 that we saw 5 months ago was definitely the peak, and now we have seen 4 consecutive months of a decline in inflation. The only problem is, when this inflation went up, it went up like a rocket. And when it is coming down, it's like it's on a very slow-moving escalator. What is important is the trend. And for us as the central bank, we would like to see that inflation declining towards the midpoint of the inflation target range, and that is what would give us comfort that it would protect the incomes of the poor.
Okay, and final question for you, Governor. What is your outlook for the South African economy for the year 2023?
The outlook for 2023 is going to be very challenging. What we have seen over the past 3 years have been the shocks that the South African economy had been exposed to, whether it had been load shedding, whether it had been COVID, whether it had been the floods, that the South African economy has demonstrated incredible resilience. And last year, so many of the quarters on the growth front surprised on the upside. And I'm not surprised that some of the market commentators actually believe that 2022 GDP outcome could be better than what the central bank has done. But that is in the past. The challenge is going to be 2023, and it's anybody's call.